I want to show a few features that I think just came into existence not too long ago. So let's hit play online. Then, besides my terrible record there, you can see up there in the top right corner that little bracket thing. That's for tournaments. We're going to click that. Over here on the ended constructed invite only, this March Epic Digital Monthly, if you click on that, it brings up, okay, we have the winner. If you hit rounds info, you can then actually see and copy the deck list, and I'll describe that as we go through. I want to definitely bring up a few of the ones that I thought were, I guess the term would be standout. So let's look at TomEpicGamin. Boom, there's the list over here on the right. If you go down there in the bottom, you hit export, and then you go down to one of your open deck, files, and you hit import. The deck will come in. So while we're here, let's go through some of the cards and the reason why I think this is a pretty good metagame deck. Now, you keep hearing us talk about what meta. What that usually means is the ever evolving landscape of what's going on right now. So this, some things are better than others when you start seeing certain decks over and over and over again. You need to have an answer for Kark. You need to have an answer for Wild Sage, and probably some of the evil-based decks, whether they're Zaxxon-based or some of these demon-based decks. So we'll cover some of that stuff. So let's go with some of the outliers, and then we'll get to the meat of it all. Here in Wild, you have 3 Kong because they're utterly amazing. You have 3 Surprise Attack because 1 Surprise Attack Kong works pretty well, but so many other non-ambush bodies, when given ambush, basically work out very well. And then that allows you to pack Wolf's Bite. Now, Wolf's Bite, it's not always going to be the perfect answer to every situation, but the number of times you can usually take out someone's Muse or Misguide Herald, Necromancer, there are plenty of small 2 defense or less bodies that need to die, and you don't want to use your gold to do it. And then obviously you add the recycle option, you add a wolf, and part of that is also the fact that you get a blocker. That's most likely what you're going to be using that wolf for. You get a blocker, you have a threat to attack if need be for 0, and that definitely matters. The other outliers up here are the good ones, because obviously the core of the deck is definitely a Sage deck. Angel of the Gate. Angel of the Gate is a very interesting card, and for a while I was wondering why people weren't running it, or rather, I shouldn't say that. I wasn't seeing it more. I'll phrase it that way. You have a 7 attack, 7 defense, airborne ambush. And then you have, it comes at the start of your turn, gain 5. So that's every turn. Obviously, you want to usually put it into play at the end of your opponent's turn so that their window to respond is much smaller. But say, why this over Avenging Angel or Angel of Light? Why wait for the 5 life? Well, the fact that it is 7 attack and 7 defense is kind of huge because Angel of Death, which is a 6/5, shows up quite often. This can block 6 power flyers. This can kill 6 defense flyers and still remain standing. So this can handle the Avenging Angel. This can handle the Angel of Death. Now, one of the cards that you don't see that... there we go. You don't see that often. Resurrection. Now, I'll go over where Resurrection's really good within the confines of this deck. But let's look at it first. So obviously you get to draw 2. That is, in a deck that's either mid-range or control, you want many of your events to have that stable onto it. But then the reason you would run Resurrection over other cards. Target champion, your discard pile is broken this turn and return to play. So obviously this is a reactionary card. You need to have your gold open. So if you play, say, Angel of the Gate and they blow it up, you're not going to get to use Resurrection. This very much is a reactionary card. You want it to go to their turn, they blow up the world with an apocalypse, something like that, and then you just bring one of your key pieces back on the board, or some of the other ones I'll go over in a few moments. You don't see this as much because it's more limited than, say, Final Task, because Final Task just lets you bring a champion out of either of the discard piles, put into play, it has Blitz, you can just get right down to the business. This is much more plotting. You'll see that this deck has a lot more thought required of it. I don't want to say put into it, because it is, I mean, it is a very thoughtful deck. I will give the design the utmost credit. But you also should see that this deck doesn't just come smashing in. It can win, and obviously won the entire month. It can win, but it also has the ability to reward tactical play. Now, all that opens up Second Wind. Second Wind is arguably one of the more important free cards right now. You're looking at gaining 5 health and then recycle. Obviously, it costs 0, and obviously that's usually the theme amongst these 0 cost events. But the gaining 5, you'll be in races against Wild Sage decks very often, where they just, put down one blitz or ambush body after another. Draka followed by Draka, or, Draka and then a, strafing dragon or something like that. They have the ability to get your life below 10. And depending on the build, the problem is that they have Flame Strike, which is 1 gold, deal 8 damage to a target. So you really you want to have that buffer. Obviously, if a game goes long enough, you can get more than 10 plus life out of these second wins. You can get more if you keep drawing. Let's look at the core of the deck now, the Sage parts. Ancient Chant as a 2 of. I'm sure everyone always wants to start with 3, but it is a slower card. It doesn't impact the board. And it also does draw a card if you get amnesiaed. If you recycle this card, whether or not you know that's a tactic, you can make this one of the cards you recycle and you still get an extra card out of the draw. It's a very good card, but you don't want it clogging up your hand too much, so 2 is a pretty good number. Crystal Golem is a 3 of. I talked about some of the combos with Resurrection. If you still have your gold open, end of your opponent's turn, you can use the break this card ability, then play Resurrection, pull this right back into play. Is that the greatest use for Resurrection? Because you could just have used Resurrection for drawing 2 cards. That doesn't do as much, but the option, kind of is there if you want to be tricky, or for the sake of discussion, if you had to do a block break earlier. Now, how that works, the block break combo. You ambush this in, you then assign it as a blocker. And since it's untargetable, there's nothing they really can do to, get it out of the way. Right after you assign, you do not hit, pass to block events or whatever. You immediately then break it, draw the 2 cards, and as long as the champion you were blocking doesn't have breakthrough, it's not going to get through. And if it, say, has righteousness, it will not gain them life. I've done that with a huge swing against Justice Prevails. They come with multiple bodies. They think they're going to gain 20-something health. I block break, and this one got me not only 2 cards, but they did not gain their life. So it's all about timing. And Resurrection, I want to bring that back up so that we can emphasize, Resurrection just says it has to be broken this turn. So as long as it's still in your discard pile, you don't get hit by one of those discard clears, you can use this at the end of their turn, whether you lost them to a board wipe, you lost them on your own choices, whatever. So the block break and then use Resurrection and draw 2 cards, you might save yourself some health and draw 2 cards. So it's not the most optimal use of Resurrection, but I would not be surprised if that option comes up here and there. Bringing back Angel of the Gate so you start regaining those chunks of 5 life, because the 7 defense on Angel of the Gate, just bringing that up since we're talking about, is very hard for many pieces of mid-range removal to take out. You say, like, your lightning bolts and stuff like that, they only deal 5. You look at like Rain of Fire, the maximum it deals is 5. It requires very specific 1 gold answers. So Angel of the Gate coming back in can, they finally got their Drain Essence. They took out Angel of the Gate. They're so happy. They blew up the big threat you have on the board, because 7 power can end someone just as easily. And then you just bring it back, and that starts the frustration all over again. So let's go on to Deadly Raid. Now, as a 3 of, everything I just said about Ancient Chant, you're going to go, well, why would you run 3 of these and only run 2 Ancient Chant? This can be cycled early. So if this is in your opening hand, I fully expect most times this to be cycled on a turn where, they spend their gold first, you have no ambush, or you don't want to advance the board. You can just draw 2 cards. You'll see another one later. 3 usually means you'll see one before the game is over, very reliably, sometimes 2 of them. Your champions gain unblockable and +2/+0. Now, I'm going to jump ahead and jump back. Crystal Golem is one of them. Steel Golem is another. Untargetable and then becoming unblockable means that if they do not have a board wipe in hand that could be done fast, be done on your opponent's turn, because, for example, Divine Judgment and Apocalypse, Angel of Death, unless you have ways of making these things happen on your opponent's turn, it could be lights out. You put Raid on the Steel Golem, that's 15 points coming straight at them. A lot of decks are not going to survive that. So let's go back to some of our stuff. Erase, I keep saying, it's one of the best cards in the game. I really feel it is. When you play many of these games long enough, you start to learn the value of being patient, of letting your opponent, basically take enough rope to hang themselves with. Erase is one of those cards. If they have to, because it's a slow body, or it's a slow blitzer, they're like, oh, I need Rampaging Worm, for example, or Blood Drinker. Sorry, Drinker of Blood. They play it, you bounce it. That's what you do with your 1 gold. Not only you get 2 cards, and you basically take away, or we'll use the name of the card, erase their spending of 1 gold. That can be very valuable. With decks like these, you do want to keep cards in hand, well above, the 2 or 3 you might be used to with Wild Sage. You absolutely want to keep, 4 or 5, if not more. Healing on the Dominator. The more you play it, the more you learn about its tricks. Now, on its surface, it is a 1 gold, 8/8 ambush. Okay. The Loyalty 2 is obviously where this thing gets interesting, but just remember, if you absolutely need a blocking body, 8/8 coming out of nowhere is still a valuable threat. Loyalty 2 show 2 Sage cards, gain control of target champion this turn, it gains Blitz. I'm going to emphasize, like I do on most of the other times I talk about it, this does not prepare it. So if your opponent has an expended champion, even if you gain control of it, you're not going to be able to attack with it. Where this gets valuable are the times where you're attacking with your team, your gold is open. They decide they're going to use ambush, say Lurking Giant. Before Lurking Giant blocks, because after they play Lurking Giant with ambush, the window then comes back to you as the attacker. You can bring this in with Loyalty 2 to steal their guy in a prepared state, give it Blitz. So you finish your attack then at the end of this, and then you can attack with the very, hopeful defender that they did have. That guy is gone. And then you can come in and attack more. That's awesome. It can also be used in case, let's say, they're attacking with a Juggernaut. You can simply just gain control of it, which takes it out of combat. Now, yes, you don't get to swing back with it. That is on your opponent's turn. But you still do get the option to remove, however many points, one giant attacker, a Thundarus, or, some really pumped up attacker. You can remove something you can't destroy or banish or whatever your solution is, and simply get it out of combat for a turn. That option is there. Now, you can also technically give Helion Blitz. That allows it to attack for 8. It also allows it to use its expend ability of dealing 2 damage to up to 2 targets, which obviously does include players. And there are times, there are some slower decks. You've seen a few that I play where it'll be like, oh, they misguide Herald into, Thought Plucker. And you're like, all right, well, that's not that hard to wipe everything out. End of their turn, put in Helion. Destroy both of them. Easy. Just clear out their side of the board, and you have an 8/8 ready to go next turn. You can also keep plinking away, taking out, a zombie and putting 2 damage on the opponent's face. Helion does a lot of things, but you have to know your timing, and that this deck is definitely, if I had to put on like the casual, beginner, intermediate, advanced scale, I think it's somewhere between intermediate and advanced. Now, to play it properly, you definitely need to understand all those skills about timing and everything else. The list itself is not overly complex. I think there's a lot of really awesome choices here. Choices I don't usually see. Now, of course, you'll see more of them now that this deck is won, but, we'll go from there. Oh, Ice Drake, how I do love you. Assuming that your opponent decides that they're going to pinpoint take out your Ice Drake for whatever reason, you put it in on your turn, or you put it, you know, through some means or another, it gets destroyed before combat. You can then use Resurrection to bring Ice Drake back, re-trigger Loyalty, because that's what's nice about Resurrection and Final Task over Army of the Apocalypse. They do trigger Loyalty, they do trigger Tribute. So here, you can still get another full tap down of their opponent's creatures. It's also just one of the best Sage cards, or just one of the best cards in the game when it does trigger, because so many times, if you remember our previous podcast, where Matt's talking about the waves of attack, many times people will send out that probing attack, that first attacker all by itself. Ice Drake is as close as we're going to get the ceasefire for a very long time. You can shut down all their next wave of attack. You can shut down everything else and still have a 6/8 that may or may not block. So Ice Drake is very important. Oh, the Juggernaut. Here we are. So the Juggernaut, which is obviously a threat, it's not going to break on your turn, let's put it that way. It just being a 9 power, blitz, breakthrough, most likely it's going to trigger to draw a card to replace itself. It's just a very good offensive threat. Now, the difference is, this deck running it over, say, Wild Sage and everything else, you don't need to put down a huge number of threats, but the ones you do put down should really try to end their existence. And, 9 power tends to do that, especially when they can't break it. So, obviously, this is one of the ones where you'll play it on your turn before your opponent plays their gold, and then you let them try to react. You you do it to feel out the board, but a number of times, like, against Wild Sage, you're usually not that concerned. The main way many Wild Sage decks have of dealing with this are Spore Beast. And Spore Beast, there's basically no stopping Spore Beast. You can kill Spore Beast, but because if they'll put it in and give it Blitz, it will already be online before you get a chance to react. But at the same time, though, pulling a Spore Beast out of their hand and then killing it isn't the worst. Misguided Herald. So this one is definitely one of the more defining cards of the game period right now. 3 power, 3 power, it's airborne. You look at your top 5, put, one of them in place. So it's somewhere between a pseudo search card and just value, because you're stapling a 3/2 flyer onto, whatever it is you do find. Now, obviously, you don't have as much control over what you find, but it turns an empty board state or a neutral board state into a winning board state because you have multiple bodies there. Now, can you whiff on it? Yes. Most decks that have Misguided Herald do have a pretty decent saturation, but I still have, even in decks where I feel I do have a good saturation, will whiff. This is still a good card to play, and I'll show you why in a moment. To obviously just, play this, get Juggernaut. Like that, Juggernaut is probably one of the best things to flip off of a Misguided Herald, just because you put a card you wouldn't mind spending a gold for, and you don't have to spend the gold for it. Sea Titan. Another, just classic. It's been around since the beginning of the game. Whether it's Surprise Attack, whether it's Misguided Herald, you're looking at a body that's untargetable. So you've seen, I skipped ahead to show you Steel Golem. All these untargetable, then with a Deadly Raid, it's lights out. Plus the fact that obviously it's another gold reset card. This time it's slow. It happens on your turn unless you have Surprise Attack. But also as an 11/14, it's going to it can block an unbuffed Juggernaut all day, every day. And this thing just wanted to click off of me. Then we bring up our 2-count Steel Golem. Why is this a 2-count? Well, because you have to make 60 cards. But also, without Blitz, Steel Golem isn't as enjoyable as the other untargetables that you have, because you have the ambush of Crystal Golem, you have Sea Titan, doing something when it comes in. This is just a big body. Now, obviously, it's really good play off of surprise attack. You have a decent chance of giving it blitz, if it flops off of, say, Misguide Herald. But, it's if you're going to make a cut out of any of the untargetables, this is the one you usually would pick because it requires loyalty, unlike the other two. Now let's get into the free ones. So you'll see from just right here on the right side of your screen, these zeros are rather indicative many times of these Sage-heavy Shadow Imp decks, and obviously this is both. It is those decks, but it's also not. Obviously, that sounds very contrived, and I'll try to explain it a little bit better. But Force Mage Apprentice, you have Blitz. Technically, if you had to, you can play this followed up with a Deadly Raid, and you still have a 2 power added on to attack that's unblockable. So it's still an option. Don't forget that's there. But its ability to deal 2 damage and then be prepared and deal another 2, well, it's killing 2 zombies, 2 wolves. It is dealing 4 damage to a given target, with your plays in there. It just dovetails very nicely once you learn the mechanics of how to get this thing up and rolling. It's a threat to many things, whether it be their Thought Pluckers. There we go, Thought Pluckers, Muse. We're talking, we're bringing up a lot of other Sage cards, but there are many Sage cards people splash for that they need to die. 3 count Shadow Imp. It's not the defining card, but it's a very good start because it's already unblockable. It has Ambush, Blitz, and this is where I was talking about where Misguide Herald starts to show even more value, and that seems like Misguide Herald already gives you value. But Shadow Imp, you play your Shadow Imp, you attack with them, then you play Misguide Herald. It basically is like paying your gold after your attack. So you're not really losing that attack window. You're not exposing yourself to getting blown out. Shadow Imp is very hard to kill, and you feel very bad when you have to use 1 gold to do it. You'll notice the 3 defense on it is the problem for why it's so hard to kill. You can't use your Force Mage Apprentice. You can't, use your Wolf Bite. It requires answers that probably cost a gold. So, that it makes it fun, but also still fair because it's only 2 power. Siren Song. Well, there's a lot of fighting right now with 0 cost threats. You have Dark Knight, you have stealing their Muse. We just talked about Shadow Imp because some people get very ambitious with their Shadow Imp. They will attack with it, bounce it back to their hand, put it out again, and then attack with it because they want to try and drop your life total as low as possible, as quickly as possible. If they do that, steal their Shadow Imp, just never bounce it back to their hand. That's kind of important there because it will go back to their hand. But, also it has the infamous draw 2 on the bottom of it. Being able to spend 0 to steal one of their threats, whether it's a key piece or not, it does not all, it might just be stealing that, wolf token, but it can be done. They wolf bite, they take out one of your guys, they make a wolf. You can take that wolf before blockers are declared, so that, that wolf that they put out to stop your steel golem, well, that thing's gone, and then you get a steel golem smashing in there. For this deck, this is much more controlling. Now, obviously, it does not need to be played that way. Certain hands don't need to be played that way. But for many of the choices, this is a much more grindy deck. It's a deck that's ready to play the long game. Unlike many of these Wild Sage decks or even some of these Wild Evil decks I see popping up, you need to really, be methodical in your choices. You don't want to be sitting there with only 1 or 2 cards in hand. You need to pick your battles, and that's where Angel of the Gate and Second Wind come in. You have the ability to be patient. There's a famous, Magic the Gathering saying about the only life point that matters is the last one. Don't be afraid to go to 10 life or whatever very quickly, but then completely reverse the game through some intelligent plays. Vanishing. Over Hasty Retreat, these are the ones that are, they're not quite interchangeable, but there's definitely some trickiness in there. With Vanishing, you can bounce and reuse, say, your Misguide Herald, bounce and reuse your Kong, post-combat. You can, save one of your guys that was going to be ambushed, you're attacking him with, say, whatever it would be. And, as long as it's not untargetable, they decide, oh, we're going to put in this surprise blocker and it would normally kill you. Well, you can save your guy. Now, also, you can bounce their pseudo blocker. If they decide they're going to ambush in a 1 gold body, it's still your turn. So this works. This works for helping to push through damage. And that's it, like I was saying with Siren Song, if they decide that, your Steel Golem, who doesn't have breakthrough, is clunking along and it would be a kill shot, this can force in that kill shot. And that's where you see the threat level of Crystal Golem, of Sea Titan. If the board doesn't have a lot of bodies and your guy's untargetable, you're slow, you're clunking in, and they have one last chance, whatever stupid ambush card it would be, or even a surprise attack. Well, they can't target your guy. So this simply just, as long as their guy's not untargetable, you can just remove it, send it right back to their hand, and because they spent their gold, this undoes their spending of gold. Hasty Retreat is more to fight those fast, aggressive decks. This seems to be able to fight, to use the term, fight trick with trick. This is a very tricky deck. It's a deck that's about forcing through one big attacker for, if Steel Golem hits you twice, that's 26 points. If you took a bad mulligan, if you paid life for the recall on, Plentiful Dead or something like that, that could end you. And, this deck can slow and methodical beat you. That's why I'm so infatuated with it. This design is so much fun. Warrior Golem. It's free. It can have blitz, but you can also just play it, sit it there to block. If it goes into your discard from anywhere, recycle. Well, why does that exact phrasing matter? Thought Plucker, Knight of Shadow. They do get played. Thought Plucker, very much so. This is the card you could possibly pitch and just recycle, get that card back. I mean, okay, they still get their card, they still have a Thought Plucker, whatever, but you're not down a card. So, it's there. I wanted to highlight this. It is, it's such a, obviously you keep hearing me, kind of wax poetic about it. It's a very well designed deck. There's a lot of thought that went into some very purposeful choices, some calls that are, hey, here's what the field's running, because it's not just a field of Wild Sage. You will see splashes for evil, splashes for good. Obviously, this is, a Sage deck that splashes 2 others. But you also have to be able to fight certain things. Now, the one thing that I'm going through it right now, what you don't see, there are no board wipes here. So there is no catch-up to a token strategy, a very heavy, very quick token strategy. Those you're going to have to find ways to fight them, whether it's putting down Helion, shooting 2 of their guys, shutting down their turns with Ice Drake. So, I mean, this is a deck that rewards methodical play, but at the same time, you can put out someone's lights very quickly if they either underestimate or they play very stereotypical of, oh, I'm going to attack with my 1 token first. Oh, what are you going to do? I have 6 tokens. I'm going to attack 1 at a time. Well, after that, if you attack with that first one, I shut you down with Ice Drake. You can buy yourself openings. This really is find an opening and demolish them for it. So, Tom, I will say congratulations on the win. I hope I did your deck justice in talking about it. I very much look forward to taking this thing for a spin. So we'll end there. I will definitely look at some of these other decks as they come up. But man, is this? I mean, it's a very exciting time to see skilled players putting out skilled decks that buck the trends, that change your understanding of the game. This there were some other builds of his, if you look at some of the other deck techs we've done, that fought a meta or that came at things from left field. This is, I don't want to say this is left field, this feels like a greatest hits, but some of the choices between Siren Song, Siren Song, Resurrection, Angel of the Gate, those are cards I don't see as much, and here they put the very, very good use. I think this is a deck you lose with a couple of times, but then you start to get better and better and better, and I think that's a good build. So, until next time, I don't know, enjoy our content, I guess, or don't, whichever.